The hardest thing I had to learn, organization. I'm Karin with Right Now Editing, where we turn good manuscripts into great books.
And I'm Peg Thomas, multi-award winning author and editor, and we are 2 editors for 5 minutes. What you got over there, Karin?
Hands down, the biggest struggle that I have had is learning how to organize my writing, or basically how I write my books. So I'm going to start the timer here. Like many new authors, I just sat down and wrote a book. I was like, oh, let me see if I can do this. I really didn't know anything about it. I know there's a lot of people who do that. They say, I just want to write a book. And so you do. And then you start to realize you don't know anything about it. So I started learning and I started studying. And I was like, oh, I need to outline. And I tried outlining manuscripts, I think 3 times. And I was lucky if I got a third of the way through the outline. And I was completely off. It was gone. And then was getting incredibly frustrated because the outlining wasn't working for me. So then I tried the pantsing, and I would just sit down and pants my story. And both of those ended up with me throwing out 40, 50,000 words because it wasn't working. But I tried to do everything, everything that everybody said. Oh, because we talked last week. Well, what about, the snowflake method, or what about, the story equation? My brain, it just, none of that was clicking. So finally I sat down. I'm like, you know what? I want my characters to start here and I want them to end up here. And I can't just sit down and write because that doesn't work for me. So how am I going to fix this? What ended up working for me is kind of what we were talking about last week. I figured out the points of conflict that I wanted to have. I knew I was going to have, and not just points of conflict, but the good things too. So for example, my book, Finally Forever, that's out, deals with a dance competition. I knew there had to be a dance competition. I knew there had to be something that was going to force the dancers apart. I knew there had to be a first kiss. And I knew that there had to be something that put their relationship in jeopardy. And finally, I found a way that I could sit down and write a book. But it took 10, 12 years for me to get there. Peg, did you just sit down and know exactly how to write a book the first time you wrote a book?
Heavens, no. And I don't know anybody who has ever done that. I don't know very many people who've ever published their first book they've written. I haven't, and I never will, because I read it a few years back and went, whoa. A, it's not the genre I wound up writing in, and B, it really stinks.
And now you write exactly like I do, right?
Right? Your first manuscript is for learning, so you need to write that first one.
But now you write exactly the same way that I do, don't you?
Yeah, no. No. My background, remember, is drafting and design engineering. So I come from I have the engineer's mind. I have to have everything charted out and plotted out and working. Yeah. I do a lot of pre-thinking before I ever start writing.
And I do some of that. But I tried to take a month to research everything. I can't do it. Now, part of it is because for me personally, I'm a better editor than I am a writer. So as long as I put something terrible on a page, I can edit it. But I can't do what I do best if I don't put something on the page. But the thing that I found fascinating was when Peg and I taught a class a couple of years ago on how to write your book. And we talked about the 2 different methods. And we broke it into 3 places. How we both prepare to write our story, how we start planning things out, and then what happens when we sit down and write the story. And Peg, do you remember what happened when we got to that 3rd part of the presentation?
Yeah, really, they merged. They kind of came together.
Exactly. So what we discovered,
do the same thing, we just do it from a little different perspective.
And so for me, over all of these years, the best advice that I have for new authors that are struggling with, well, how do I write a book? Well, somebody said that I need to do it this way. And if I don't, save the cat method, it's wrong. As Peg said last week, there are so many different craft books out there. And this is one of the things that makes writing a novel so difficult is you need to take the time to read them all. Read through these different craft books to find what works for you. And exactly what Peg did last week is the same thing that I've done is you take the bits and pieces from other people's techniques. You find the ones that speak to you, the ones that work for your process, and you create your own process. Is really, and most of the authors that I've gotten to know, that's what they do. I don't know a single one of them that actually follows somebody else's process step by step, but they let somebody else's process inspire them to create their own.
Yeah.
Any final words, Peg?
Well, I think one of the things is you can't just sit around and wait for the muse, right? We'll agree on that too. You
Yes.
have to have some kind of a plan, whether it's coming at it from characterization like Karin does, or if it's coming at it from plot like I do. It doesn't matter, but you have to have a plan and you have to work the plan. You can't just sit around and say, oh, maybe my muse will hit today and then I'll sit and write, because you're never going to get anything done. I like to tell people there's no such thing as writer's block, because when I was a secretary, I never had secretary's block. My husband was a police officer. He never had police officer's block. If it's your job, it's your job. You have to sit down and do it. You have to do the work. And it's the same with writing. It's a discipline. But if you're treating it as your job, if it's what you want to do, then you have to do it. And you have to just figure out how to do it that works for you. Make sense?
So that's my tip, Peg's tip on how to organize, how to come up with your writing process. And stop back next week and we'll talk about some more things we've struggled with. And until then, I'm Karen Beery.
And I'm Peg Thomas. We'll see you next time.